of NHS kids are going to be there. I'll be there. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. And also so I think I mentioned in the beginning of the year how we're trying to really step NHS up. And Miss LeBlanc and Miss Dowd, who are the advisors, have been doing a great job of that. They're really pushing us, but it's good. It's very needed. So we're going to be doing a service project in April, and it's going to be a dinner. Garvey Cummings explains it best because her mom has done this several times. But it's basically a dinner where you go and you get a card that has a country that you're from, and I'm sure you guys have heard of this type of thing before, but you go in and depending on what your country is, you sit with that group of people at a table and you get the portion of food that they would get in that specific country. You pay like $2 to get in or something like that, and we're going to have a speaker come in and talk about world hunger and kind of try and raise awareness to it. And we're going to donate all the money to Oxfam America. So really excited about that. Also, obviously midterms are going on right now. Stress levels are high at the high school, that's for sure. We just had our AP Spanish midterm today.
Yes,
that was a time.
That was a really good time.
But people are getting through them, and the new schedule I actually think is working. I think it's really good actually. Because,
even with the snow day,
yeah,
it got a little crazy, but
having the time to review is very, very helpful.
Yeah, even for the seniors who, some of them don't have as many midterms as say the freshman and sophomore, but it actually has been very useful for everyone. And tomorrow I actually have my senior project presentation, which I know some of you guys helped out with for the interview process and things like that. So I was working with Mr. Orzik earlier, and it was a really great way to tie in kind of what we learned from the interviews, and now tomorrow I have to go present it in front of numerous people. So I'm a little bit nervous about it, but I think the practice that we got with the interviews was really important, and I also think that being able to present in front of people, kind of like we're doing now, is really important lesson to learn. So I think that's also a really good thing for the seniors, and to just keep putting in, the senior project assignments and things like that. I think it's really important for the students, and everyone's being able to pick all these creative and interesting research topics that are so, you have people who are researching education, and then you have people researching, mental health and all these different areas, and you'd never know that students were that invested into those types of topics. So that's why I'm really excited to present tomorrow, and it was really nice to be able to collaborate with some of the adults and administrators in the area, as well as the teachers that we have at the high school.
I also have a question. The finance night person said, so they told us we were going to have training prior to the event. Do you happen to know when that's going to take place?
I don't. I actually contacted him today. It's going to be some point next week.
Okay.
He's going to give me a couple of different times and dates, and
sure.
then I'll email your advisors. And
that's so
whatever works best for you guys.
Okay, perfect. I just want to let people know.
I also have a coach's guide that I can send you in advance too, that you guys can look through, so that you kind of have some sort of idea.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Yeah. Anytime you guys want to go over, just run the grab on the list, since you have this.
Oh yeah, no worries. My mom's there taking notes, so it's okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Citizens' comments. If you've got anything that you'd like to make a comment on that is not going to be discussed later, this is your case collaborative annual report.
So this company has these big documents that Case Collaborative provided us. There's the annual report and then the annual fiscal report. So there's two big documents. And an associated letter from the auditors, which usually summarizes everything as well. The annual report provides a very comprehensive description of all the programs that Case provides. It also has a section that identifies the cost effectiveness of their programs. If you're interested, you can look at page 37, where they talk about the cost effectiveness of transportation, and yet Michelle found that we were going to save money by going to a different collaborative, and so we even saved more money than they could have saved us. So it's interesting, but that's one of the things that they point out as one of still have high quality education programs, of which we have some students who attend. And so it's nice to see the program descriptions and know that they're doing a good job. And their programs are unique in that they're housed in schools, so a lot of alternative placements are housed away from schools. And so in Maynard, we actually house quite a few of these programs. And it's really a wonderful partnership, and it's also a better opportunity for students. So it's a great partnership for us with kids, but it's also a great opportunity for students and a great program. The case annual financial report also identifies that as an organization, they're in good financial standing. The financial highlights on page 5 and 11 show that there's an unassigned balance fund of 21%, and there's a state cap of 25%, so they can't go over 25, but they're up to 21, which is pretty good. So it's a well-run system. These reports done by auditors and done by the executive director who then forwards it to the department head are well shared. So it's for information purposes only.
So, Bob, you said that, so we house some of the programs, I think it's 2 classes, right? Is that what we have?
No, we have 1 or 2 classes at the high school and 2 or 3 here at Alvin.
Because when you look at the case collaborative program enrollment, it looks like well, I guess that was 2016, 17, so I guess maybe it's been changed, but it's only had 3 kids at that point that were enrolled.
So we only have 3 kids in their programs, and they coincidentally, they're not even in the programs in our school district. They run a lot of very specialized programs for certain students with certain types of needs. And so if we had a student in our district who had a need that one of their programs here offered, then that would be perfect. But even still, the fact that, one of their programs I know is housed in yeah, and it's it's a nearby, one of our neighboring communities, and I know we have students who go there, they take the bus right there, but it's nice to know that they're in schools, right, that they're not just an alternative place with it, doesn't have the opportunity that community school does. So that's their niche in the alternative program.
I remember when I think Mary and I met with Carol this summer, she was talking about the programs that we have in-house, that it might not have been quite as equitable as far as the rent that we would get versus, some of the other communities. Do we know if that's been straightened out?
So the rent is $7,500?
Yeah, 7,200 per room. They technically only contract with us for 4 rooms. They're only paying us for 4 rooms. This is something that we've actually been talking with them about. I believe that it's the same amount no matter what school district they're in. It's part of their contract that they offer out to schools. So it's not to say that we're getting less than another school district, but what I think the issue was is that they continued to spread throughout, and they were using more rooms than what they were paying for.
And just to let you know, I did ask at the executive board meeting, and their business manager said they did a study of all the other programs, and that's what they were offering. So it's comparable to what others offer for rent. And it's not really rent, it's actually, it's like a
It's a
reimbursement.
credit.
Yeah.
They credit us on
Our other expenses.
on our expenses or when we send our students or whatever. Correct. Yeah. Yep.
So it does save us money on our out-of-district costs, which is good. Yes.
So I think that the conversation was more so not, should we ask them for more? Or it was, are they going to ask them to pay for the rooms that they're actually using? So that was where, and I know that Karen had a conversation, I've had a couple of conversations, so it's just something that's still being talked about because we had to get for sure the number of rooms that they were using here as well as at the high school from the principals. So that's where. Yeah.
And the other question I had was, does somebody oversee, I know that each one of these collaborators are, they're audited, but is there like a statewide, some of the numbers are staggering as far as the tuitions go, staggering. And is there somebody at the state level that really takes a look at the whole umbrella?
Yeah, so the Department of Ed, one of those documents is required by the Department of Ed, and recently the state increased the regulation of collaboratives to be even more transparent. And so, in fact, in the past, we never provided these reports because it wasn't required. The state actually asked us to be required to member districts. So it's an extra layer of transparency. That's what it's-
Somebody looking at the whole.
Well, and when you compare them to the private schools, their studies show that their programs are actually less expensive than the private schools when we need a special ed program. So they are still saving us money, it's just they're very expensive programs.
It's nothing away from the children.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just, we just want to make sure that everybody's happy.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Move on to the master collaborative.
Yes. Well, they all have to get them in. So again, we have the Aspen Valley collaborative financial statements as well as their annual report. I think I delivered their annual report. It's more of a glossy format. They actually they hire a marketing studio, believe it or not, to produce these documents. And so that's an example. We've talked before about how other districts actually hire consultants, whether it's for paper products that go out to the community, whether it's for websites or media or other campaigns. They actually hire consultants. They do. Aspen Valley is one of those districts, they're really a district, that does that. So anyway, that's just a side note. The reality, I just want, because we've talked about before, how can we improve populations? That's one way to do it, so that whenever anybody comes to look at their programs, they have a beautiful glossy annual report. They have a lot of other glossy documents to show all of the things they're doing. And so I think that's just a piece of relations that we might want to consider. But we're back to the reports. The report provides, again, a very comprehensive description of all the programs that they provide. And their programs, though, are in a separate school. They're not in housed in schools. So there's a little difference there, but they're still high-quality programs that we access. And it talks about their transportation program, which, as I said earlier, was actually more beneficial for us than the other collaboratives. So thanks to Michelle's good work, she was able to save money in this year's budget by switching from one collaborative to another. So it's nice that they have to prove their value and compare themselves to these private schools and these private transportation companies. And so that's a good thing. And the other thing is just that they are also in a very good financial situation when you look at their recommendations from the auditor as well. So, two very comprehensive reports on two of our collaboratives that we participate with. Any questions?
Just a comment, move on, this is transportation. Is those in transportation, pretty scary.
Again, Michelle's always looking at ways to save money. I know she and I have had some conversations on ways to save some money, so we're working on that. Continue, please.
If there's nothing else to ask her, then I will work with Spanish and bring update. So this is a bit broader than just the Spanish learning question.
There are a couple different components that I want to talk about tonight, and so I'm framing it as a little confidence building.
Well, there's recent legislation that also is important to notify you about that. Is linked to the Spanish, could be linked to the Spanish American program, so it's about getting that to us as well.
Okay, is that the look bill that's not in there?
Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah, so we have plans, but you know, it's very, very long.
I think it makes sense to flip it from the other way. So the Look Bill, or Look Act, because it's a piece of legislation that passed, does these things, requires these things to happen. Essentially, what the Look Bill is or Look Act, is that it was looking for ways of providing English language learners opportunities of developing English proficiency. You may recall over a decade ago, there was a piece of legislation passed that required all English learners to be taught in sheltered English instruction. There were lots of reasons that was passed, and what they're finding is it just simply doesn't work. As we know with all students, everyone learns differently, and so there are multiple situations where sheltered English instruction is not the best form of instruction for either developing second language literacy nor for developing content acquisition or getting content acquisition. So what this bill does is multiple components. It increases the flexibility that school districts have on the kinds of kinds of English learner programs that we can put in place. There's two-way immersion programs, there's transitional bilingual education. So there's a variety of different components that districts can choose to put in place. It increases the input from parents and guardians of English learners, requiring that when districts reach a threshold of 100 students or 5% of their total population, that they form an advisory committee that has English learner parents on it, where the advisory committee will make recommendations to the superintendent about the types of English learner programming that should be offered. It establishes educator qualifications for a variety of language acquisition programs, so again, bilingual education, immersion education, things of that nature, which will be very helpful for us in establishing pathways for folks to get those certifications to be in the programs and teach those programs. It further establishes English learner benchmarks, so how long should kids take in order to get certain language development and district reporting requirements. Interestingly for us, they did establish a state seal of biliteracy that will be added to report cards starting, they hope, in 2018, 2019. They'll establish a state parameter list that if our students meet, and they can meet it through a variety of ways, whether they're a second language speaker at home and have all these other components or not, or for some of our students, for example, who become fluent in a second language through school, they'll also be able to receive that biliteracy piece on their diploma. So there'll be a state component of that. And then it also expands the pre-K English learner requirements, just identifying and census materials to make sure that we're helping kids earlier on. So we're kind of looking and seeing what that looks like for us. So that's the overall components of the bill. In terms of what this means for Maynard, Maynard has, under the direction of Dr. Gabron, who was a project coordinator for us and is doing some consulting work for us, but several years ago he established the District English Learner Committee, which does continue to meet, and we have consistently over the last 2 years attempted to identify parents to sit on that board. Recently we were able to identify additional structures through WAVM that we're hoping will be able to, through their broadcast, news broadcasts, get into homes of English learner families and get them onto these committees and things of that nature. So we're continuing to do that. We're actually excited that our CPR year is this year because it will help to ensure that we have adequate data and reporting procedures in place. We did a lot of work over the last year and over the spring to identify what our procedures are and create procedures where they are not. But with this legislation coming on board, it'll be great to have that oversight right away rather than waiting a few years. We had talked about, as part of the Global Competency Committee, establishing a global competency pathway. So that will be something that once the state releases their parameters for the seal of biliteracy, we will be well posed to meet and provide opportunities for our students to be able to do that. So I'm very excited about that opportunity. Again, the pre-K procedures are something that we're sort of looking at and trying to figure out how we do that. Early ed is something that's cumbersome and multifaceted with different components, but thankfully we have some really great people who are aware of that. And then the other component that I think is uniquely situated for is that we have a diverse range of world language programs that will provide us an opportunity for those diverse EL learner opportunities. So the fact that we have the immersion program already in existence provides us an opportunity for students who, for Spanish EL students to be able to be in that program as we go up and those programs go into the middle school and into the high school and become different levels of Spanish instruction. We have staff who 3 years ago, established a curriculum for a heritage speakers Spanish program. So we have staff that are already thinking in these ways and in these directions, and so it'll be nice to be able to have the flexibility to be able to provide those opportunities for students. So I'm going to pause there. If there are any questions about the Look Bill, Look Act itself, I keep calling it a bill, it's not, it's an act, passed, it's law.
Think there is any funding that goes along with this?
What I do think is helpful, and I think this is part of, I don't know why they did it the way they did it, but one of the things that is helpful is that instead of having sheltered English instruction and pull out for us as a low incidence district, where we have to have EL teachers who meet with the students a certain number of minutes throughout the course of a week, and that's become very cumbersome for us to be able to have, and yet we don't have a full-size population to be able to qualify for funding. The fact that we're going to be able to provide those services differently and probably in more effective ways for some of our students, I think might mitigate some of the lack of funding in that capacity.
Well, I will say, though, I think it was 3 years ago, we had 40 students, EL students, now we're up to 70. And
Right.
the bridge from small to a moderate is 100. So if we were to grow significantly beyond 100 EL students, then we get some funding, but it's not a lot of money.
It's not a lot of funding. The Title III grant is incredibly, as a lot of things with the state are, different components. They ask you to use it in specific ways that sometimes isn't the way that would be most helpful for for the district. So I think what this does, though, is it does acknowledge that sheltered English instruction, while a part of English education, is not the only way of teaching students English, and I think that really acknowledges the lived experience of a lot of our students and families, and our teachers, both our EL teachers and our regular education teachers, who are saying, you know, these kids are being pulled for my math lesson every day because they need to learn English, but they're still not learning the math, and this isn't working. So I think it's an acknowledgement that there were some flaws in that old system, and if we do it right, if we tackle this head on, I think we're going to have an opportunity to provide better instruction for some of our most at-risk students. But then I also think it's that asset model where these students are coming with skills to the table that they can then share with other students as well. And so I think it will really create an incredible opportunity for all of our kids and all of our teachers as well. So I see this as a good thing. You know, obviously with the additional mandates of reporting and the preschool, you know, trying to figure out what that means, there's a potential that, you know, we got some extra work ahead of us. But overall, on the whole, this is one of the better things, I think, pieces of legislation for education we've seen come down from the state. So,
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just 'cause I didn't realize we had 70 kids.
yeah.
What are the major languages or
Yep.
ethnicities that we're seeing?
The two are Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese are the two biggest ones, and then we have a smattering of other languages. There's no third one that sort of rises up.
How many more are represented?
How many more languages?
Besides the two you mentioned?
I'd have to look. I want to say it's 5 or 6, but I'm not entirely sure. But the rest of them are very small numbers, 2 or 3 students here or there. So I would have to look at that piece of it. Any other questions on the look? I don't really like Let's talk about where this came from. So last year, as you know, we had the Global Competency Task Force that was commissioned to provide a recommendation on world language programming K through 12. One of those components of that was what do we do with immersion programming 6 through 8? What do we do as it moves into the middle school? And as this group of women came together and were having some really thoughtful, open, honest conversations, one of the things that we realized is we were sort of all sitting there saying, well, I think, or my experience is, or my child wants. And there were also some challenges that were being brought up in other arenas in the district. And so what we decided to do was to commission the Massachusetts Association of Bilingual Educators to come in and provide a review of the immersion programming. They came in and did multiple meetings, focus group meetings with parents, with teachers, did meetings with administrators, and then created a report of which you have the executive summary and also the findings and recommendations. In terms of the strengths of the program, this is one of the things that they talked very significantly about, that they were kind of surprised to see, frankly. I guess they don't see it very often, is that we had articulated in our district vision a sense of global competency as being important, and not just for the immersion program, but the fact that this was something we were considering overall. The idea that we were having a task force to look at K through 12 programming, the idea that we wanted to think about global competency as a key component of a student's education, they thought was incredibly important, and really commended us for that. The parental support that showed through in the task force, or excuse me, in the focus group meetings, they said there was a strong parental advocacy arm behind this program. They said that there was really appropriate implementation of most of the language immersion program elements. There were some, as you see in the recommendations, that we needed to work on. The secure and stable leadership on the part of the district and school administration was an important component, and the support that the program had from those two groups was important. They said there were adequate resources in the target language for content as well as for literacy and numeracy development, and that the academic content was aligned to the state standards. So all good things. The challenges that they noted through their work was, first, there were parental concerns around communication. I'm going to preface all of this with that a lot of the concerns and that are challenges that were raised through this report are challenges that I have heard and talked about with all of you about all of our programming. And so one of the things you're going to see is that we have some work to do across the board that this individual focus group sort of was able to put a microscope on, which was great. So parental concerns around communication, around the development of the program and changes to the program, the need for continued professional development for faculty, staff, and administration. This was everything from the immersion teachers themselves in terms of pedagogy and instruction, to administration on how to support those programs, and support staff on how to integrate seamlessly between the various programs. So there was a lot of professional development that they recommended and some resources they provided for us there. Consistency and alignment of instructional strategies, again, that is something that we've seen in the English-speaking programs as well. We've talked a lot about the need for common planning time so that we can have, instead of an individual classroom approach, a more horizontally aligned and vertically aligned approach. That was something that they found as well. They talked about the assessment plan in the target language and being able to report out on student skill development in the target language, and that's something, again, that we've mentioned through the elementary report cards and other things that needs to happen. And the lack of common planning time. The way they didn't phrase it that way, the way they phrased it was isolation of the teachers, because not only are they the only teacher within the program in their grade level, and we don't have common planning time at the time. I think we had limited, we don't have sufficient common planning time, or we didn't have it at that point last year as well, and we don't have it vertically either, so they identified that. So their recommendations for us were really these three components. One is to make sure that all of the tenets of the immersion program and best practices for dual language instruction and foreign language instructors were being implemented with fidelity across the board through all of our programs. Engage in continued professional development that's customized for the Maynard faculty and staff. We have teachers who have skill sets in a variety of areas, and administrators and so on, and making sure that we're customizing it to what they need is important. And then they recommended the creation of a full-time or part-time position. The way it's actually worded in the report, and I don't know if it's worded this way in the summary as well, is full-time in parentheses or part-time. So I think they were emphasizing the full-time for immersion coach or a lead teacher. So those were their recommendations. Yeah, no. So these are sort of the next steps that we have for the district-wide. The first one is a communication task force. This is something that we had on the strategic plan that we wanted to get started, had intended to start in January. So we will start that on the second Thursday of the month from 6 to 7 o'clock in February. So we will begin that. They will be housed here. We will be sending information out through the blogs, Facebook, and so on. And that communication committee is really going to do a couple pieces. One of the things, it will take the work that was done by Jean LaBelle last year. She actually started a communication task force and has a great structure for sort of the 8 ways, I think it's called, the book is the 8 Ways of Caring. But essentially it provides 8 different areas or lenses through which you need to look in order to make sure you're communicating sort of around your entire community. And I thought it was a really helpful frame. The pieces that I see us starting with will be communication regarding student progress. We've talked a lot about report cards, both in the immersion and outside of the immersion. We've also talked about parent conferences, both with staff and with families as well. So really trying to get a sense of how can we use the limited time and the limited resources we have to provide the best communication in a two-way situation so that we're working together as partners. So that will be sort of the first one we do, and then the second piece that I think this group will take up is really having something, expanding something that the Fowler School Council has started, which is sort of a procedure manual for each building, where we can have something that's established to address the concerns we've heard that, you know, parents sort of have to guess what transitions are happening as they go from one building to another, or how procedures are different. So really starting with those 2 components, I think, will help in some of the pieces that we're doing here, that we need to do. Continues to seek scheduling solutions for both vertical and horizontal common planning. That is not a problem that's unique to the immersion program. That is something that I have talked with you all about as being where if we're going to spend dollars, we need to spend dollars there. We need time. I need time for my teachers to get in collaborative teams and have conversations around student work to help inform their instruction. It is all over the research and the literature that that's a really effective use of funding. So we need to continue to find ways of doing that across the board, and I'm hopeful that we'll have some solutions in the near future. Continued professional development for all staff on best practices and response to intervention strategies. Response to intervention, I believe we did a presentation on earlier, is just this idea that if you can address concerns at the lowest level with some challenges, you know, or with some interventions, you're going to be able to address 70 to 80% of the concerns, and then you escalate it up from there. But there's specific strategies that one needs to know and be aware of in order to do that, and also structures that need to be in place in order to make that possible and practical within a classroom setting. And so that's something, again, that we need to re-emphasize across the board. The report really emphasized it for immersion specifically because of the challenge of that curriculum and the fact that nearly 100% of our students are non-native Spanish speakers, that presents a unique challenge within that program. And then a revision of the scope and sequence and curriculum maps. This is something that has been on our radar and on our agenda. We have been working on. We are working right now on discrete skill pieces. We've talked about the writing. We've talked about the numeracy development. So this is really just going soup to nuts through all of this. The last year and this year, or last summer, we allocated a significant amount of funding for curriculum development and curriculum alignment. We will do the same thing again this year so that we can really get that work. Curriculum mapping is something that is incredibly time-consuming and incredibly valuable to do, but it's really hard to get your head around doing it, you know, during the school year. So I've found that the best way of doing it is to dedicate some time outside where we have some teachers come in to do that work. So that's sort of the district-wide pieces.
It sort of sounds like we're creating 2 school systems within one.
Not at all.
We're grasping all the stuff in the marketing program, and then we've got the curriculum, all the same pieces for the other traditional.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think so, because if you recall, one of the strengths that they identified is that the content that we're teaching is very closely aligned to the Massachusetts frameworks. So we're not doing two pieces. The additional challenge, and it's the same challenge that you would have through any other type of program, whether it's a STEM program, through the English learners that we talked about, through special education, is how do you provide access to students through the variety of curriculum so that they can achieve their goals within that. But no, so the frameworks, and this is why when we began to do the curriculum mapping work and came on board, the districts that we have talked to in the state, we said, do you have your Spanish immersion curriculum maps? And they said, no, we have the English math maps, and then we just do it in Spanish, right, is sort of the way that works. What I will get to in the next piece is what we do need to do differently for the Spanish immersion program specifically, and this is where it's an opportunity for us to bridge over to that EL component and provide some pieces. So no, I don't think we're creating two separate programs. I think we're providing opportunities for students to be successful in multiple ways. Similarly to the way we do for band when they start in 4th or 5th grade, we're providing an opportunity for a group of students to see themselves as musicians within the Maynard Public School system. We're providing opportunities for students to see themselves as global learners. And again, hopefully in the near future, we will have more opportunities for all of our students at the elementary level to see that. I think Jen Adams and her team and the middle school team has done a significant amount of work for the middle and high school folks to be able to see themselves as global learners. The students who were up here earlier referencing the trip to Spain, the students who went to Guatemala last year. So I think it's just providing different programs for different kids. So we do have some things that we need to do for the immersion program specifically. One of them is, I think, clarifying some of the pieces of what the immersion program is, what it isn't, and those sorts of things. And so one of the things we've looked at in terms of best practices, a lot of the districts have, and Mendon Upton's a great example of this, have what I'm calling sort of a marketing website for this program. We've talked about the marketing and need to market Maynard Public Schools in general, and this is one component of that. So just simply providing what is the program, what does it mean, and some real clarity around that piece of it. So that's more the forward-facing work that we have to do, and I've talked with the teachers about what that should look like. More programmatically, and this is where, Mary, we're going to really identify and target what skills and standards need to be taught in English. So we have a program that goes through 2nd grade. Am I talking too loudly? I broke the microphone, that's funny. We have a program that goes through 2nd grade with 100% core content instruction in Spanish, starting in 3rd grade, and this was true when I came on board, that I was told the 3rd grade you do math and English in English, and then you do Spanish literacy, science, and social studies in Spanish. And what I think we're finding, and the realization that I've come to, is that we need to really target what those standards are that we're instructing in English, because we can't instruct them in Spanish and expect students to develop the proficiency there. And what that will do is really twofold. It will allow us to increase the amount of Spanish languages being spoken throughout the day for these students, because again, almost 100% of them are non-native Spanish speakers. So we'll increase the immersive aspect of the program starting in 3rd grade. But additionally, it will help us to make sure that we're targeting some skills where some kids could get lost and start to slip through the cracks, because is it the Spanish, is it the language development, those types of things. So really making sure that we know what we're teaching in English and why we're teaching in English. Part of that will also be developing the strategies to provide that scaffold for students. We want to revise the elementary report cards to be able to provide that reporting out as the report recommends, and then develop this 6 through 8 scope and sequence curriculum maps for the immersion program 6 through 8. When meeting with the teachers and looking at the recommendation from the task force, we believe we can create a pretty profound language experience for students that aligns to the core content of the other teachers in that grade level. And so we're excited about doing that to launch with our students for next year. And that's it. Questions?
So none of the things that you
pointed out in here, but is in the summary, is about the plan of support for students in the program with special needs.
So part of that was related to the instructional strategies and to the response for intervention. So we've talked about, and you and I have spoken specifically about being able to deal and address student issues with an approach within the classroom setting rather than. Mhm. Yeah. Everyone's calls it different things. Yes.
Daniel,
Yeah.
the difficult thing for us is when we talk RTI doesn't really exist in schools, it's more of an elementary and middle school.
Right.
So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The
Absolutely.
literature and the research is just finally starting to catch up with those of us who work with small adults.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a little tricky, but I'm with you. Sorry, Jen.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Well, so I'd like to answer some of those questions as well as I can. I can't speak about specific staff members because those are employee discussions, employees have rights, confidentiality. So some of those things I can't comment on, nor should I. And including in this document, the reason why the school committee received the executive summary and the findings is because a significant portion of this document is about employee performance data. And so it's a working document for the administration, but under the format, it's a working document for the administration. It's not for public consumption. So it just isn't a document for public consumption, which is why we thought we would do a nice presentation, share the findings, share the summary. In regards to the bumps in the road, when you start a new program, there's bumps in the road. There's an awful lot of success with this program as well. And while there may be differences of opinion, I heard somebody ask about special education. We have had our attorneys look at this over and over again as far as what we should be doing. And there may be differences of opinion, but the reality is we're following the law, we're following our attorneys' advices. And while we've had some bumps in the road, it's still a very good program. So I hope that addresses some of your concerns. That's what I can add. And there's been general education classes where there have been similar employee problems, and those parents have concerns too. And we'll address them and do the best we can to solve the problem. But that has happened in general ed classrooms as well, where there have been major bumps in the road, employee-wise. Danielle, I think your hand is up on that, please.
So two things I read that what's not true is, I didn't read it, I'm like, yeah, thank you, right? We have several conversations, and every single thing that you report is exactly what you're talking. And then, another thing to take into consideration was she mentioned, and she's going to reach her, but it was you don't have other commodities, the ability to speak Spanish, read Spanish, and sing Spanish. All of these skills that child must have in order to configure a bilingual child. We have no money. So when you're considering this program, I'm sorry, I didn't know even so like my child knows not to know Spanish, no, but I really don't know where my child is with exception of I think bringing him to Mass General 2 years in a row and having him start to Spanish. That's all I know, and I made that I want to know there was one kid in the program for 120 kids. Another thing that is not there, and that was not discussed, was content knowledge. We're going to look at all the Spanish for a second and send the evaluation of all the Spanish version and the English version, but we have not assessed the impact of the Spanish version on the graduate students. Math, writing abilities, social studies abilities. All that we just don't know. What I know is not only my child, but all the children in starting out fifth grade, they are red flags in regards to academic knowledge. Where that came from, I don't know. But there are several gaps in math and writing, the ability to communicate using self-insurance, which I also want to okay? The gaps are there, but most of the kids who have not realized that from school, the parents realizing it, and then I refuse to make up. Okay, so I was very, very, very well, some kind of evaluation, how it's going to look at common knowledge of the different things because we know there's very little work while writing, especially in the Spanish.
I wouldn't say especially in the immersion program.
And I say that because it's a new program, so it makes sense that if I need a teacher every year, we have the same amount of time to collaborate, to have them in the system, to align.
So
the
It's just, you know, you may have a teacher who has been point and she would be more likely to know other teachers in the next grade in language than a teacher who just does. Right? Oh my God.
Well, I would also beg to differ before I let Jennifer speak. I know you want to speak.
I just have a light clarifying.
Sure. Let go.
Well, can I ask you a question? So, not going how do we assess kids in English if they are mastering content? What I don't understand, right? So we have some, please don't get
I will try.
I'm going to answer that.
Danielle, I'm going to ask you to look at me when I get technical.
my point is teachers do things
Yes,
and we measure those things.
Correct.
As opposed to.
some of them.
So can
So
I,
like, so I don't, I guess what I don't
You're asking the
understand
question
is,
I wanted to
hope we're not looking for above and beyond that,
Yeah.
because I think that would be.
well, certainly you're looking at people who actually love data. And anything we can do to help teachers, provide them with tools to have more data, I think that's great. But to answer your question, or more meaningful data, that's a good one too. But to answer your question, and I'll defer to Jen, but I'm pretty certain that the same state assessments are used starting in third grade for general education as well as Spanish immersion.
Correct.
And on those state assessments, the Spanish immersion students as a whole, or a whole group, non-specifics, there may be some that are up, some that are down, but as a whole, actually perform better than the general population. I could be wrong. Well, I know, but that's the assessment. The assessment of content of the English and math is MCAS for the most part. There are other smaller assessments that teachers do during the year that, you know, they use engagement and structure. We have different types of assessments that teachers can use. But the point is, the major assessment, MCAS, the Spanish immersion kids are close. It's not like way above. They're close, but they're above the general ed average.
So if you
So
go
I'll let
back
Jennifer-
to, and I don't remember what date we gave the presentation, but it was on the school improvement plan presentations. And one of the pieces that we articulated was the need as a district to identify a comprehensive common assessment program. And that's what you're talking about, Don, because we have literacy and math data through MCAS. We have some science data because we have 5th and 8th grade, although that's weird to figure out between 5th and 8th grade, like where things happened or didn't, right? So we have some of that from the state. We also have inconsistent data over the last 4 years because the state has been changing their standardized testing, right? So there's lots of pieces there. And what, from both my previous district and in coming here, I don't, the state data is a data point that we look at and we pay attention to, but it's one. I would rather have more consistent data on what our students are doing on an ongoing basis and be able to compare that across classrooms and across grade levels, not as a punitive, let's figure out who's good, who's bad, but instead to figure out who's getting it, who's not, and what do we do about it. And that's sort of a very common basic piece in education. And in terms of are we doing this in the immersion versus the English-speaking classrooms, we're doing it in the same capacity in the immersion classroom as we're doing it in the English classrooms. I appreciate the two of you identifying that, the lack of vertical integration is not unique to the immersion. We just had a professional development where all of our feedback on this vertical piece was, we're doing the same things over and over again. And, we can air all the dirty laundry and all of these different pieces. I'm not saying Maynard Public Schools is perfect, and by no means do I think that we are. We have a lot of room to grow. I think the fact that we have an immersion program that provides a unique opportunity for students is something that we should be proud of, but we shouldn't rest there, and by no means do I intend to. And in terms of what was promised 6 years ago and where we are now, I wasn't here 6 years ago. I can't speak to that. I can speak to the fact that I'm standing up here now indicating we're going to do this work, and all I can say is you can hold me accountable if it doesn't get done. And that's the best that I can put forward.
Speaking of that, I was here 6 years ago, and all along we were saying we're looking at models, we're looking at Mendon Up, we're looking at Millis. And even in the meetings that I attended in your task force, the parents talked about, well, we don't want you to look at Millis, we'd rather you look at something else. And we listen to parents, but that's why things have evolved, not necessarily stayed stagnant with one plan, because we have listened to parents. So I know you've been waiting, why don't you? Yeah.
So I have two children in Brown, and I know that district we are limited
that can help with your provide more channel feedback from the person on an ongoing basis, not to only work with you or like promise, but more of a monthly, 5 month, quarterly, that session. I think that would help with parenting. But I think that now that we can compliment our going forward, that in a second, we do have an internal one that we issue that and as experience with person with too much, who we can have and we will, so I'm sure that teachers do care enough to really be, development. But I think that having some type of, meeting or that community can help with family members. I think we are looking for a lot of communication like people who have educated versus, there's a lot of areas that feel like students can improve and probably not cost anything, but can certainly provide resources, doing workshops, is this a learning issue? Is this something that we feel like that? Just little small things that I feel like we're falling behind and being really reactive. And all of these, and I feel like our proactive approach is some of these areas that we can probably keep on improving, but at least have a basis or a foundation so that our community
So that goes, yep, absolutely. And Dawn and I have talked about, not related to immersion, but related to the task force group that you have coming up, about retention? The retention task force piece, about some of those components and how we can address that, because Dawn loves all of my task force committees that I have that meet all of the time. And one of the things that we've talked about is a model that Neshoba has, where they have a standing, what they call a curriculum committee, that I've been very interested in and been talking with the people about, where it is sort of multifaceted, representative of different groups, and they do have a standing meeting where these issues are sort of cycled through. So it's not a task force for this, a task force for that, a task force for this. It's communication committee or curriculum committee that they have set up. All of the report card revisions go through that and those sorts of things. So one of the recommendations I had for Dawn was for people to go out and talk to parents who are on, we can find out parents who are on that and see if that's something that we'd like to do, because I do think we need a better structure for that, so that we can be both tight in our communication but also loose in being able to respond to issues as well. Yep. I mean, maybe. So there's a variety of different immersion bilingual education programs, and one of the pieces that we've talked about internally with this marketing is really coming around what name do we call our what will be third through eighth grade, because immersion, the true immersion piece is immersed, 100% or 80% instruction in the Spanish language, and there were a variety of people who heard different things when it was first rolled out, and I don't want to rehash sort of what was said and what wasn't said, and because from teachers to parents to administrators, everyone has about 5 different ways in which the program was designed. But when I came on board, which is all I can speak to, it was designed as transitioning to English instruction starting in 3rd grade as it moved up forward, which isn't a true immersion program. So that's part of the work that we're doing with the teachers to identify where are those specific standards that we want to teach in English for specific reasons. Potentially we could look at more of a two-way, but I think that that's really down the road. I think what we're looking at right now is identifying Spanish-speaking EL students that we have within our population, talking with them, with their families, and seeing if this would be something that they'd be interested in becoming a part of this program, and figuring out how we would support their English language development within that capacity. I think that makes more sense right now than a whole shift. Now, as it goes into the middle school and the language content is less and less, it does provide an opportunity for students to be integrated within those classes. The fact that in 3 years we're going to have a set of freshmen who speak fluent Spanish, we're going to be able to do some different components with heritage speakers and things of that nature, and be able to use that asset model so that these kids aren't sort of removed and put in a separate room to learn English, but instead they're seen as the models for their peers. Sure. Yep. So they gave us recommendations on various assessments. Yep. So the ones that we're looking at were the report card piece that they want to look at, which the teachers had been bringing forward, was the WIDA standards and using that component and bringing that. It's something we already do. We use it for our other pieces, and so it would be an easy fix. That's a reporting out component, but there's some other assessments that we've been provided through this report that our teachers are looking at to see how we can use. And again, that's creating that common assessment bank where this is the expectation. And I do just want to emphasize that this is something we need to do in both of our programs, and emphasize that piece. For good or for ill, it just is where we are as a district. Is that correct? So the plan for 6th to 8th grade, we did the report, I don't remember when, a couple months ago, from the task force. And so that has been, that has already been published. Essentially the plan is that the students will take a Spanish language class. We're debating the name of it, but essentially it'll be Spanish literature course that is aligned to the content of the grade level components. And then they're working out the schedule piece to be able to provide flexibility for recess, for zone instruction, and this would be an opportunity for Spanish language instruction where all of the students will have another block of time that they will be instructed in Spanish. Yeah. Yes, they will. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yes, so that they're learning language. Correct. Yep. In the same way that we do leveling for math and things of that nature. They likely will not get Latin. Because Latin currently is correct. Latin is a core content instruction in the same way that Spanish is. So their language would be Spanish. And there's just not room currently within the structure of the schedule to do that. So the idea, that's more of what we're looking for that Spanish language class to be, that it's not, we're not looking at like when we went to Millis, and Lisa Padalino, I could have her come speak to this better than I could because I'm not a Spanish teacher. When we went to Millis, essentially the language class that she saw there was like a Spanish 2, that 6th graders were taking the equivalent of a Spanish 2 class that you would traditionally have in high school. They had the Spanish 2 textbooks and they were learning about travel, and they had to learn the word suitcase because I guess you don't use the word suitcase in immersion often, so it was something they had to learn. It was not something that we were particularly fond of, so we were not looking to go in that direction. And so in talking with the teachers, both the grade level teacher leaders, talking with the world language teachers, what we're going to be creating for that curriculum will be more of a content-based course in the language component, which frankly I think will be more interesting for the students as well. And then that secondary piece, again, the Fowler Scheduling Committee, which has multiple different requests from parents and so on, is working out the length of time that second block will be, and so then that will determine what is done there in terms of that piece of it. But will still have the zone time where the students will be able to have interventions or extensions based on their ability, and so that's an opportunity for some language development if needed there as well. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. No, not the curriculum,
It's
the
a
recommendation.
Just to tell Siobhan, it was the 14th and 17th where we got the recommendation. That second block, that's not an everyday thing.
I believe that so this is where having multiple different committees is I believe it is an everyday thing. That is the intention, because of all of the concerns that we have heard around recess, around reading, around writing, around intervention work. There's lots of different pieces that need to fit into, that people want to put into the Fowler schedule. And so what they're doing is they're looking at a way of creating a flexible block of time that those pieces can fit into, and it would be every day.
But it isn't, the schedule isn't complete.
My understanding is that the scheduling committee met last week, possibly, to finalize some components, and it should be done in short order, is my understanding. So it's something that we are pushing for so that we can get it done. Yeah, no, I think, yeah, if we're scheduling in May, it's a problem, we were last year. So, yeah, I don't like it when we do that. My principals know we don't like that. Yeah, so in terms of that piece, and in terms of staffing, there'll be sufficient time for that, and that was part of the concern of the task force, was not only staffing, but funding of staffing, and making sure that we can do that regardless. So we were very diligent about, trying to do things within our means, within a way that made sense for the continuation of all of the programming and all of the students. The other concerns that I've heard raised about the turnover of staffing and being able to fill those positions, it is a challenging position to fill. When we hired the elementary immersion position, I think we had 7 applicants. When we hired the English elementary position, I think we had 300 applicants. So the pool is very different. We are also very close to urban areas that pay more money for these people who have a highly sought after skill set. And so what we have had to do, and again, I can only speak to what I've done and what my team has done since we've been here, what we have had to do is to find out other avenues of identifying those staffing positions. Our friend from Spain, who is by all accounts being very well received by both her colleagues and her staff. She will be here for 3 years with the potential, if she likes us, to re-up for another 2. So that's a 5-year commitment. And this is something that Millis has done routinely through the Spanish Embassy. Additionally, they provide, I don't think it was the ambassador, I think it was a delegate, I'm not sure who it was, from the Spanish Embassy came in December to the school to look at the program, and they provide professional development opportunities and things of that nature. So it's a great resource for us. We are also reaching out to area colleges that have programs, specifically specialized programs in English language instruction or special education, so bilingual components for folks who are bilingual, LaSalle College being one of our partners, so that we can get those people and be the person that they go to right away. And it's no different than hiring a physics or a chemistry teacher. You gotta hit the ground hard and running and hope you get someone good, because those people are really hard to find. Yep. Mhm.
what they are doing versus what, are doing. And I know that talking about school retention and teachers, I hope that school teachers like develop more incorporated ways to foster those new teachers that we are getting for those kinds of issues and those, and I think that's one of where I just learned so that in Meadow that there isn't really a lot of that's non-commercial teachers really often about what's going on in the university, so a sharing of just make it more of a regular day-to-day kind of feeling. And I know from my experience unfortunately, Spanish immersion students were really trying to lower, I think what you were talking about in general comment about how many fourth-grade classes and we have, four regular, so it just is the right way, and I hope that we can, either, make it a little more inclusive, because I think that, it helps in those
Yes, and that was something we talked about on the task force as well. We specifically had a group of people, and again, they happened to all be women, who were both students, had students in the immersion program and did not, for that very reason of bringing the community back together again. We have talked about it as an administrative team, as a staff. I certainly think that the teachers value their colleagues, and I think the way that we talk about these programs is very important, and that was why part of the presentation was not just about what are we doing within the immersion program, but what are the improvements we need to make within the district. Because again, what I saw through this report and this conversation and this process are the same challenges that we have in the other classes as well. So thank you for identifying that. I think it's, as a community, it's very important that this is just something we have. Right. Yeah. Yep. How we talk matters. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
Has there been feedback on that from parents?
It's mixed. It's mixed.
I know personally, my daughter was in fourth, and I don't know if this is lessons or if it's worth the year, but the three kids that are put in that particular classroom during the Spanish kids, so
Yep.
it's not really serving the purpose. So
Right.
integrating them into another classroom, and what really is going on in that minutes and rules and.
Yeah, Erica, I'll give, my Anna reported exactly the same thing at the beginning of the year, but it seems like right about Thanksgiving, the reporting of what you just described seemed to taper off, and now she's actively talking about some of the other kids that are in their specials rotation. So I think 100% it was a concern of mine at the beginning of the year, but at least Amanda and I are feeling that pressure start to lessen.
And I will say that, just one comment, we're starting to now do it in Meadow as well, so when they have their indoor recess, they're dividing our boy class up, and this person goes, they're pretty, because I love you all. My son's so happy, he's like, Mom, I get to go visit Mr. Thomas, and they have snakes or something like that.
Oh my God, no, they don't.
Didn't hear from me.
Right, that's not
So I
allowed.
think the earlier we start at America, I think the more.
That's not good.
Kids may always call their house later, but I'm hoping if we keep starting it earlier, there'll be less of a stigma, because we really do want it.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I wonder if I did an how to make all of the kids.
So we've talked about that, and it's something that has come up. And in terms of the feedback, yes, we have received feedback from both parents and teachers. It is mixed. Many identify the same thing that you have said. Other people have said it's great and it's wonderful. Other people have said that they prefer to, because I believe in fifth grade this year they're not, because there's only 5 classes, so they don't have to divide them up for the specials rotation. And some people prefer that, right? Some of the kids prefer that. So one of the things we've talked about as an administrative structure or as a procedure is how do we, in the same way that in 6th grade where they're all integrated with the exception of Spanish and math, how can we do the same sort of thing within the specials, and how do we do that with 4th and 5th graders who have never, gone to different classrooms by themselves, and how do we just manage that piece? So yeah, it is something we're talking about, and we are aware of, so it's great feedback. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, someone cares about me and they know who I am, and yep, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so it wasn't a perfect, I think last year, because last year was 4th grade was the first year, that was the first year we had done it, got some feedback, I think they did some things differently. And one of the pieces that we've talked about with the specialist teachers is training and professional development around recognizing that that's a reality, that these kids have been together for the same time, and then, okay, how do we do that in a way that doesn't, so if I'm the art teacher, and I have no idea if he does this or not, and I don't assign seats and I just let the kids, huh? No, here, let the kids sit where they want, but I can't do that here because, so it's conversations and awareness around those issues too. So it's not perfect, and it's great to continue to get that feedback.
So, I really appreciate that there's people doing like this, that are not accessible online, I'm not. I feel like you're well aware of that concept, when next steps, you're making it further, you feel like it's not like you're starting to move in the right direction, where we things done.
No, I just put my job on the line to get it all done, so. No, this is. But this.
I mean, I think a really good way, maybe that's that, this hearing is, do you feel the level of control?
Yeah.
And you inherited a program that was started, on the fly, with the intention, because you had a, talked about this teacher, well, on October, it can be tough sometimes.
Yep.
So I get that. But if you feel good about moving forward, the school committee and everybody, that's pretty good, we all feel we have a lot of things, a lot of things, maybe an action planning program for like, one of the things we thought in this position would be, God, here's one of those inspirations. It's getting better every year. But I don't think it's quite yet how many different things will also work. We can't move them all forward at like speed. So I just, do you feel good moving forward with what we have this outside audit? We have that in place, and we'll never make everyone happy. We got to do the best we can. Do you feel good about moving forward? I think that's.
I do. I mean, again, I can't emphasize enough that the work we need to do in the immersion program is the work that we need to do for all of our programs.
That's what I hear, and I think that's actually encouraging. One of there are a few things that it sounds like you're looking at how we do report versus some way to traditionally set this managed. But also having the curriculum committee, things like the special administration special, some of them that ended up coming up here, it occurs to me that those things could end up coming up in those meetings as part of the curriculum piece, and it might actually help all parents to realize that these are, that we're sharing curriculum issues, that it's not just referring in one person to other groups of things, so that creates.
And I do think that that point, Natasha is well taken. This is a part of, if any program is going to be successful, it is the Maynard Public School program. And if we begin to pit program against program, we're all going to fail in the same way that if we pit the town versus the school, which we've been talking about ad nauseum for decades, as every other town has as well. So we have work to do to move forward and to get better. I don't think anyone thought that Maynard was done improving educationally. I mean, we've had lots of conversation around that. The one thing that, so I think it matters how we talk about it. I think it matters how we think about it. I think it also matters how we put the resources, and I don't mean dollars, I mean time and money into allowing this work to go forward. And I mentioned, and this is an aside to budget, but I mentioned to the finance committee when we went down and did the presentation that, they said, oh, does 1% really matter? And I was like, 1% allows me to go back and talk about curriculum instead of getting groups of teachers together to figure out which position to cut next. And that's really where it's at. Our teachers have been through a lot in the last 3 years, and their work is really hard. And the valuing the immersion teachers or the English teachers, they're the ones who are with the kids all day, who know your students, who know your children. Do we have work to do to make sure that we as a system know who we are and our kids? Absolutely. But I do feel that we have the right people in the right places to do that, and we just need to be given the ability to get that done.
The takeaways I heard were similar to what we talk about all the time. Better community, more confident, and we're tracking down and more professional development, and that's just something that we talk about across the board. So that's not going to happen to bring an expert in the
But it was important.
I'm so happy with the brand. But it's not like it's not a good exercise. But I mean, this is rocket science. You actually know what you're doing. You've got your staff. You need the time to actually do the jobs.
And we do value the parent input, and we have.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
You go through those steps
Yeah.
with parents, but this isn't so very good restaurant. You don't have to.
Yeah, so I do think the curriculum committee, where it's all of us, I think that's a great point, that we need to talk about our programs, and then if we need to divide up because this program needs something different at this particular moment.
And I love having to see like one of your presentations that were community. I remember hearing that before. But that's awesome. Like that's exactly that is what the biggest struggle we have. And it's one of those things that does really for us. Like this is not
There sure is.
Speaking of that, communicating, it sounds like people did not end up getting communication out of the different courses, will have to work
Yep.
very later.
I will put something together and we'll send it out we'll figure out a way to get it to everyone.
But it is probably in the minutes.
Oh, it's definitely, it's definitely in the minutes, but we can figure out.
If Jen puts something brief together, we can put it out on Facebook and Twitter, on the website. Jen, can you leave that powered up? And my follow-up question is, what cable are you using to tie into the projector? Are you using an HDMI?
No, she's using a Mac.
Do you have an HDMI?
We should have one there. I think we do, Justin.
I just plug it in, like what's
Yeah, I've got an HDMI.
No, it's the old school one.
Okay, so I will use a lot of visualization. All right, so moving on, for those of you who are holding an agenda, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is one that I'm responsible for this evening. It's the Friends of Fowler Fields and the Maynard Youth Soccer update. For those of you who frequent our meetings or watch us online, the members of the board will remember, and those of you in the audience will remember that about 6 weeks ago, we were approached by an organization under the umbrella of Friends of Youth Soccer. And they came to us with a proposal and seeking support for the renovation and upgrade of New Fowler Fields behind this building. Those of you who have children that do soccer or use it for any other of the multitude of activities that we use this field for, know that it's been pretty challenging. It's horribly compacted, you can't grow grass, it doesn't really grow. It's a multitude of problems. So they came to us asking for approval to reach out to CBC in terms of grant funding to improve the facility. I was nominated as the liaison to the group, and I've subsequently met with them on 2 occasions and been part of the meeting. So last night, we were supposed to go in front of CBC with final project proposal. It was changed until the last minute, and I will apologize to you as the chair. I'm a little prepared for the last minute. Giving today, I took to have handouts for you guys tonight, but ultimately it will come together, and I'm so grateful that it's up there. But again, that's not going to happen. But here's a 30,000-foot snapshot of the project. The Friends of Maynard Soccer, I've worked with Aaron Foster, who will be DPW director, and in conjunction with UPN, who is our town engineering firm. They got some money from the CPC a cycle ago, and they commissioned a study with the project and looked at what was needed to get it up to the quality that they deemed necessary to put the field on and field with. So it's gone through a couple of drafts, but the final project as proposed, and Alan, perhaps I'll give you some of this information. We can push it out digitally for the people in the audience who want to get to see it. I know that the members of the board have it in front of them. They're proposing 2 full-length, full-size sockets. About 300 feet long, about 175 feet wide. And do the math, it's 100 yards by about 55 yards, which is a full-size recreation soccer field. And they want to prepare the site in such a way that the fields can be rotated seasonally. So there's 2 drawings in the handout that I sent to you guys. You'll see that one of the SketchUps is an east-west orientation and another is a north-south orientation. So for those of you who are trying to visualize it in your mind, east-west runs parallel to the parking lot right down on the back of the building, and north-south runs underneath the building. So they want to set it up in such a way that they can rotate the fields seasonally so that both the wear and tear is not as uniform and we get a lot of capital project. So UPN went to the Commonwealth and used a bunch of widely available engineering tools and figures and put together a scope and sequence for the project. So the way that they're proposing this project is to basically start by aerating and sanding the building on flat out. And so that it does a number of things. But first, it provides a really good medium so that we can grow better grass, soften under the foot, even better. It's really softer for a long period of time. It should hold up to the wear and tear better and be gentler on our athlete's lives. The other thing that they're proposing is doing some slope work so that the fields are better. Because obviously we put in several $100,000 of improvements in to get the water off of it, and that project very quickly goes south. So the scope of the project as it currently stands is proposing about $250,000. So friends of the Tyler Field and Gaming Soccer are going to the CPC in this public supplement for about $150,000. $150,000 now coming out of the recreation portion of the CPC offers. And what that would do is combine with a plan on behalf of the Friends of Gaming Soccer to get some funds from businesses in town, some corporate sponsorships, and also they're doing some grassroots fundraising. Some of you who follow Facebook know that they've got a GoFundMe page that's up, and then that's now they're up around that grant. So they're pulling in a bunch of different revenue streams because frankly they have identified a need. I think we as a school committee off and on in the years have been aware of that and feel that they're trying to appreciate it. So what I'm here tonight is to follow up and just report out on the process as it currently stands. As I said last night, the final project proposal was supposed to work by the CPC, but when I showed up at town hall last night at 7 o'clock, I found it dark because somebody forgot to put me on the email chain and notify me that the CPC needed to do things like that. So yeah, I had the unique experience of being in town hall all by myself in the garden.
Did you stay?
What's that?
Did you stay?
No, I walked in the building, nobody was there, I went home.
Just keep the secret password.
My mama did raise me with some common sense, man.
Just checking.
I sent a couple of frantic emails and I got yeah, we were supposed to tell you about that. Well, thanks. So here's the deal, the meeting was rescheduled for next Wednesday. So CPC, as they always do, anybody who's been through the process knows the CPC reviews every project proposal and follows up with a series of questions. Notably, what other revenue streams are you considering? What bucket of money are you looking for, whether it's historical or recreation or conservation? And in this case, one of the follow-up questions that they did ask, similar to the project that we did next door for the playground a few years ago, is what's the school committee's level of involvement in this project? The members of the board know that we have submitted a support letter as part of the application. with the funding, saying that yes, we absolutely are on board with this. We have been involved in the conversation, we've sent a representative to be able to funding to New York, or even our community. But then it came down to the same question and asking for the playground. That is, are you willing to put some financial resources behind it as well? So that's the question that we are talking about tonight. It's the reason for the budget or discussion item. Because if we proceed in that direction and we make a motion, there is a possibility of both the some financial resources here. For those of you who aren't familiar with the project that we did on Stowe Playground a few years ago, you'll remember that we do have some money sitting in an account that we use for one-time purposes, one-time spending. It's primarily been gained over the years from our international student tuition. We don't use it for any recurring costs or any recurring structural debt. We use it for things like playgrounds and other capital projects and stuff like that. So that's the question that's on the board tonight, is if we see fit to continue to support the project, and if we are willing to contribute money to the project in the same time. So at that point, do I have a topic for everyone?
$243,000. You contributed $50,000.
So it's pretty comprehensive what we're
Yes. So at this point in time, you'll notice, and again, I apologize for those of you who know this and not having this. The project proposal, I pushed out the site plan, and I also pushed out the financial analysis. It's broken up into a couple of different pieces. The budgetary number is just about $250,000, of which $150 million is released to CMS for the other $150 million themselves to raise for the other so the other options that are on that list, they have the alternate of having irrigation or switching from seed to sod. But just what was quoted, they're adding irrigation, adding sod, with seed, driving the culture and it's the opinion of the group. And it's the opinion of their also myself. So in reality, we're talking the park basement design. So yeah, historically, we contributed to the playground, which worked out to about 25% of the total project. And I'm here to make a little discussion if you want to support it, and if you want to support it.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that when we did from the playground project, we had revenue coming in for that now. And in this last year, we had no revenue coming in. So, I mean, we have the money there. It's definitely a worthwhile project. I think we should support it in some manner, and I think we should, I would advocate that you do support it, because we do have money in that account, but that account is limited. Account on the shelf, I think it's about.
It was 101.
Numbers, I think when we look at it,
Yeah, I think it's 101,000 in it. But again, just to reiterate, that was gained over several years of having a really substantial number of foreign exchange kids paying us.
we have 17 students.
Yeah.
And since then, obviously, the political climate has changed, the dollar is strong. Massachusetts is the most expensive state in the nation for international students, amongst everything. So we have a lot of things that are working against us right now, and we absolutely should, with the exception of a couple of half-time Brazilian students over the last year or so, we really haven't had an international student.
I just have one question when it comes to this. So the Friends of Maynard Soccer, is that separate than Maynard Youth Soccer? So it's their organization. So and this is just for future. It has nothing to do with what we can contribute or whatever. Just my question, because I had went back and forth with them. are they planning on, once we redo the fields, because then at that point, then it will be at the cost of us to maintain those fields. Are they planning on starting to pay to rent those fields from that point? Because,
So we have this conversation, Michelle.
okay,
Some of those conversations are very similar to the ones that we had about the high school
Yeah.
and so forth, and they're very open to that idea. In fact, CPC is one of the follow-up questions to the initial project of what it was.
who's gonna maintain, right, right.
I also,
So,
So to further flesh out the answer to your question. Yeah.
It's
So-
not them specifically, there are a lot of people who are saying, I think, I was hoping we were starting to talk about, so we can't do it with Americans.
So in response to the maintenance plan, it's going to be a larger dialogue between ourselves and Aaron and Maynard Soccer. However, Maynard Soccer has indicated willing to sort of the workflow sort of situation where you would pass a court audience where they've done seeding.
which I agree with, so, and I don't know if this is the opportunity to say this, but just in this past year, so I made that agreement with all of our youth programs, that whatever you contributed back to the school, I would reduce your bill by, because, you know, I feel like if you're scratching our back, we're more than happy to take care of you, to be honest, because then that takes away money that I have to spend on doing these things, because we also use the fields for our students. But I also make the argument that these fields are for our students, mainly, and I understand we're owned by the town, but, you know, when we're working out our budget to maintain our fields, it's for use of the high school and Fowler soccer team and not over abuse of the fields that get them degraded over the years, but just wait 1 second. So, and I think, and we've had the conversation here, when I first started, I kind of tackled this because, you know, nobody was kind of paying to use our facilities, nobody was really paying to use our, not only inside, but our outside fields, and yet we were paying to maintain them. And then kind of getting some negative comments on the fact that we weren't able to maintain them to the level that people expected them to be at. Which in turn we said, you know, if you were paying us to rent these things, then we would have the money to maintain them at the level that you would pay to rent them at, right? Not the concept there, but, so just with the soccer, I just had a conversation with them, a couple of months ago, and I honestly have not addressed it since, just because I knew that this was going on and I didn't know where things stood, but, one of the things I think we need to take a look at and realize is that when you're renting our fields to use them, we're providing you with the space. We're providing you with the field to work on. We should not be compensating you for if you have to buy different goalie nets because our nets are too big for your youth program, or if you have to, program specific, yes. So we don't provide, like, and so like if you were to rent our building, we provide you with the stage. If the stage is too small, that's not really we're not going to build a bigger stage for you, you know. This is the stage, you're renting it, this is what you get. So I just think that we have to, it's an important part of this conversation, even moving forward with this project, on what the expectation is on, because we have some great fields out here, and in 3 years I don't have the money to maintain them because nobody's paid me, then we've wasted a lot of money on these fields. So that's really all I'm getting at, is that we honestly have to have the conversation on if it's a youth program, is it a rec program, you know, is it a town program, like where do these things lie, so that, you know, I can make a logical decision on how I'm supposed to charge them or where they fit into our rental policy type of thing. So, and program-specific things don't really count on, I should give you a discount because you had to buy different nets. Like, that's just really my only thing. I just really hope that this conversation happens on, and it's not just soccer, it's all the programs here, because I think, yeah, right.
So that's really huge for us now.
I just think we have to just make sure we have that conversation, because I don't want it to be like, we're investing all of these money and then, all of this money, and then it comes down the road where we've had cuts or whatever, and I'm worrying about maintaining a soccer field that I'm receiving no funds for. Do you know what I'm saying in that sense?
100%, and unfortunately, it's like a small town. I grew up in a town where the schools and the rec were very separate.
Correct.
Like, if I
Me
was
too.
playing rec soccer, I had a different complex than when I played high school varsity.
Correct.
But unfortunately, life in a small town means that we all share.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that's been really good on the town politics side of things is the dialogue.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
5-6 years I've been doing this now, and conversations are better. I remember last year when we started fighting about this thing to ask people for money, I had a lot of hard conversations around
Right.
that. I'm like, what's that insurance you guys doing?
Right.
I'm like, exactly what we want her to do.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
Right.
so, like, yeah, we're all part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that they want to be part of the process.
Right.
They're not just going to be like a standalone or anything like that, because, you know, I'm commenting on this, right? It's their 501c. Like, that's what they're doing, so they can raise the money to pay for the project.
Right.
But ultimately, the guys that are the 501c are the same guys that are the leadership of the soccer.
Okay.
So the organizations are one and the same. The conversations are productive. They acknowledge the fact that they're going to be part of the process.
Okay.
All of that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I grew up in Hudson, and it's, the rec department in Hudson is huge. Like, you don't have any youth. Youth is the rec department there, so it's very different. It's a very different atmosphere from here, because they're able to, and they also maintain the fields, the rec department in Hudson, even the school fields. So it's a completely different atmosphere, because they get paid for soccer or baseball or whatever, and then they use those funds to maintain their area. So it's a different mindset. But I just wanted to make sure that that would be part of the conversation, because like it's a huge investment, it's an awesome investment. I actually was on the board of directors at the Hudson Portuguese Club when we redid our soccer field there, and I know how much money that costs. So it's a great investment, but I just think that the conversation has to be on what happens after.
So I had similar concerns, but I think Justin shared the answer with me. So I did see also that Aaron talked about requesting funds from the town to maintain all the fields, because we've improved so many fields across the town. That that's also a consideration that the town has to consider how much they're going to be funding it, so it doesn't come out of our facilities rentals, but it comes out of the town budget.
Right.
So those factors that I saw you were talking about with them in that meeting. So it is nice to see the dialogue with the town.
Yeah. I mean, they have a seeding machine, and they have an aerator now, and they have a lot of the stuff that's going to save us money ultimately in the long run. Because again, like in a small town, those of you who've been here for a few years know that facility maintenance is now handled on the town side. You know, we have staff that maintain our buildings, but
They're managed, but we pay for it. It's part of our budget.
I mean, that's like,
Yeah, yeah.
but that's
Sorry, I just wanted to, like,
There is no.
sorry, I just want to put it out there,
it's
you
not
know?
us and them.
Yeah.
It's not our custodian.
Right, oh, no, and I will say that I work very closely with Tim, and I know that I heard he was in a safety meeting today where they were talking about a bunch of stuff, and he said, oh, I have to check on the budget, I have to check on the money, I have to check on the money. So they're very conscious about the fact that it's, you know, we're working on a tight budget, and even though they're the town, he's still concerned as if we're his checkbook as well, like his own personal. So it's a great communication between us. So.
So when it came to the playground, I know that there was a couple things with that. Number one, it was on the town capital plan, and it wasn't here to use the playground with, you as residents helping. So I'm curious to see where Valley Field is on the capital plan. It's not.
It is 2019. Correct, yeah.
And the answer almost doesn't matter, but I also think we have to keep track of those things. And then I was, one other thing is I think, you should remember, we went to the free cash for the program, so sort of free cash. So we had a small amount for the school committee, we had, I think we had, unexpected as well. So I'm just a little bit nervous, and I almost wanted to say that I only supported the signed the agreement, but then I remembered the decision. So I'm not worried about that. And I know that we're all trying to be nice, and I have no problem with soccer. Soccer is great, but I don't want to build something that we have no place to go. So I'll have some faith in you and some parents and deliver. But I think that you could relate to the group that there should also be something that's slightly more free cash. Because there's what, I mean, I forget the exact number, but so that's when we voted on in May. This is exactly what we were going to figure. It was 3 pots of money, so no one had to feel it. So it's just a recommendation that I would ask if we all agree that they would talk to their selectmen and say, hey, because if they just need another 50 grand, anyway, it's just how we successfully then were able to, because if you think this through, someone's going to be presenting a town meeting, and it's nice that they've done this because it's a success. So I'm also thinking for success, and success is everyone's project. It is sort of all of us doing it. So just a thought. My biggest one really is the free cash. Please don't forget to ask for the free cash.
The topic came up 2 meetings ago of the group. So there is some awareness there, but I don't know if there's there a timeliness too?
Well, Maytown meeting is not settled. There's no 7 in the market.
Yeah.
So it's limited time.
Yeah, we have 3 town meetings, which is in March, and then it's special.
Justin, I have a question. With looking at the estimate, it's just there's alternate 1, which is the upgrading to sod, and then alternate 2 for the irrigation system. Can you do the irrigation system without upgrading to sod? Because what I wonder is, since the town does have it, and the town is looking into it on the capital plan, I feel like sometimes it's better to save money for longer and go for the irrigation. Even if that means, maybe that means putting on, applying for the CPC right now. But I just hate, it's like when we talk about solar farms, if we lease those panels, well, what would it mean to say to the owners, we need to purchase them, and then that ability to regulation. So I'm just curious, because I know that would still bring it up to, I would think about order. I'm not including the 20% contingency fee.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think it's a great project. I think it's great, I know we've been here a lot of times talking about it, I think the rest of you it's a good project.
Absolutely. The CPC is the funding mechanism, but the reality is it's a revenue. The coincidence is that it happens to fall on our project, which is why we're part of the process. So in response to your question, there was the conversation of what if we do fund it in chunks, what if we phase it over 2 or 3 years? The concern on the part of EPA is that they're seeing runaway construction costs. And they're worried that that number could go up as much as 30% over the next 18 months. So essentially we're chasing the cost of the target for those cost factors. So there's a certain amount of underlying urgency to keep the bottle reasonable, just because they're hyper-aware and we're all hyper-aware that there's just not a lot of time. So I think that's why they're really trying to push this bubble cycle and trying to get shovels in the ground as soon as possible. Because the EPA consultants are cited a couple of numbers for construction costs over the last 2 to 3 years, and it's even more expensive on a year-over-year basis.
Do we have a sense of who's going to do it from the we just decided to make our data sense of how much is viable for that? Fundraising, a little more maybe Don's question about free cash. They got the 150 from the CPC, they fundraised, and they did well with free cash, maybe actually more than is viable. Is that a number to go?
So, I know that there was some conversation about trying to get the board next week, and that's something that I'd like to look at. Wednesday's a CPC meeting, so we're a little bit short on that. That is a mechanism that can certainly be started after the next week. And as far as the corporate fundraising, I think the vision of the process was not starting to knock on doors with huge phone calls.
think he has to be benefited in our support, for his team, but because that funding is not really great, too much. I wonder, like you're saying, we could get maybe 25. I don't know what other schools are before I can look at the formal motion. I guess my question is, what happens if they don't get the money from the fundraising piece?
So,
From their fundraising, it all depends on all these pieces coming together.
yeah, so it is kind of contingent on all that, and I'm delving into the funds involved at this point. Michelle?
I'm just gonna say, so with the playground, they actually did not ask us for the funds until the project was complete. So if you're worrying about, oh, we're gonna give them money and then it's not gonna happen, where does that lie? I'm assuming, because Aaron did the playground as well, I'm assuming it would be, after everything, it was literally after everything was said and done and they were paying the last bill is actually when they came to us to pay our portion of it, so.
The motion could include things like contingent upon the passing of funding, right? Because let's say we're at the CPC fund, we have to go down and say, hold on, so I don't want to give them $25. Yeah, well, just as a placeholder for when they get to 250, like we'll probably do that. Maybe we'll do it, whatever. So I would say if we do a motion tonight, it's contingent upon the meeting, asking the article, and also contingent upon whether we can the fundraising goal. I knew more than that, right? Their internal was like, is it 50 or is it 60?
So, it depends on whether you're talking or Mary
Yeah.
or the CP. So, their GoFundMe has a goal of 10,000 in our coach. And then their corporate fundraising is going around maybe number, as far as like the sponsorships and so forth. So that's starting to fill in that magic, 50 to 75 that we would be sure of the construction costs. So to circle back to your motion of contingency, being part of the process and being like invested as far as time and energy is concerned, that's still the only way that I would proceed.
Oh, yeah.
I would want some contingencies
Yeah.
on this, because I do not just want to throw money out of the window.
It could easily
We
be-
did the same thing for playground. We
Yeah.
said contingent upon X, Y, and Z, because we didn't want to make it sound like we will money for 5 years, because we're going to, if you don't use it, we will.
Coming back to Mary Money that you asked about, like, what they want to have, there has been some conversation with the consultants, with the slightly crazy, what is part of the sliding scale, and like, well, if 8 inches of sand in preparation costs this much, what can we get for, or 6 inches cost us? So again, there's going to be some sliding scale, there might be some number of iteration. And again, we don't really know what the final number is going to be.
Right, well,
until we
that
get out to
20%
bid.
contingency worries me a little bit because it actually means
Right. Right, but what Aaron was talking about is during the first meeting I started with them, is to circle back to the process of the playground. And he said, they took 3 bids and the spread was $150,000. And again, you also don't know what at any moment in time the labor costs are going to be, the fuel costs are going to be. So like an estimate is just an estimate. So that's like really how he's trying to account for this. Because, they could say, and the numbers are pulled off the Department of Labor website or whatever it is, Commonwealth. So when it goes out to bid, there might be a number that comes in 15% under that. There might be a number that comes in 25% under that. We just don't know until we get the project approved, put it out to bid, or we can put it out to bid until we have the financial backing. So it's all of these different items that we can come together kind of perfectly.
So, to go on what Dawn said, maybe, because, you're gonna bring back to them, one of our concerns is if you should go to free cash, and that would make it a little easier for you than the fundraising piece of it. So, one of the ways to speak what Dawn said was we could say, Squiggly wants to support with X number of dollars, subject to full funding of the project, and approval of the CPC grant at town meeting. That way, it kind of encompasses everything, and then advise them that in the past projects, we've gone for free cash.
CPC is up.
Because there, so playground, there was an issue with snag, a concern, as far as, us choosing to put money there. As a school committee, and thinking about our priorities, and, at that point, we were still, the playground is getting hot in the middle of, we will move forward without this capital plan, and not starting any. We're just getting into that process. And it ended up being on the capital plan, but there was still discussion about that. So that's one thing where, I think, it's in some ways a larger sense of town clarity funding. And so, I don't know how to do that.
You have concerns?
I do have concerns in that way, because I think this project, when I look at this project in isolation, and I'm not like, I should take the ball soccer. Of course I want this to move forward, and I see what it does for the town, for everyone, on both sides, on all of us, the whole community. And then just looking though at, and where we stand, and I have concern about, being able to, about the response, without even us having
Backlash.
the board of selectmen of hitting a number that we're willing to do, because that was one of the CPC acting in isolation and saying, let's do a school, let's put forward money, without understanding, having in mind the larger town priorities, including the school as well. So I just feel that, I don't know if I want to commit to it, and I don't know if it's responsible to commit to a number without having some of those conversations before that Wednesday meeting. To say that we'd be willing to be able to put something from that, we have that 100,000, we will put something for, but a range maybe, it could range from 10 to 25,000, I mean, I just want to know, but I just don't feel like right now, I'd be able to, I'm just going to put that out there without.
Yeah, I mean, if we were recurring each year,
Yeah, that was
which is
just,
really the stage we were at when
yeah,
that came forward.
and we also had a little year, they were like, we haven't gone through the 2 years of the budget yet, or we've gone through the last 2 years, and really starting to have this discussion. And so there were a bunch of them that had, it was just a different time when that happened.
But, so I agree, I think it's a great project, and we have to solve it. But, so I do think it's a great project, but I think that we're always in the position of doing things the right way, the best way. We've had some money in the meetings, and honestly, it's more of a tip for them, right? If you want to raise $100,000, if you want to go to the town and say, and ask on behalf of the school for support, if you think about the budget process, we generally get 60% of the funds. And then we naturally get the cash every year. We could make here that 60% of that should be spent on school. Not making that up. Because there are times it's through. And I know we're not putting anything forward to the town meeting, because Aaron doesn't have any of that happen school. But I think that 50 from free cash is not much to ask. And I'm not putting 50 as the number, but it's really advice to this group. I support the group, I think we're on the project. If we had a revolving source of funding for one-time investments, this would be, to me, a no-brainer. So it's not the soccer people's fault, they're just hitting us when times are tough.
Honestly, I appreciate the question and the discussion. I wonder to what degree does the board of selectmen know, I just would imagine keeping them apprised of.
I don't know what level of individual conversations are going on, but they're just communicating with their community aware of the possibilities of asking for but I mean, we reach out to people on the US and we try to talk to them because at this point, it's only
Conversation.
it's not concrete.
I appreciate that. I have a problem with it. But I do think we have to start thinking about budget. We've done a lot
was what we did for the playground, we tried to find a way, knowing all the resources and all the people involved, right? What's the best way to get this done? And is it a better thing for the school committee to write an article, or ask for an article, and think, I mean, going about it, that's a big source of funding, one-time funding, all the school. Is it better for us to say, we'd like to ask for $100,000 of free cash in May to go towards the top field project? So I guess my point is I support the project, but what's the best funding source and how can we best support them? So it's certainly not a negative fact to them. I think we're just debating how we can just.
How about make a motion to give further verbal support of the project with the statement that there will be further discussion as to what funding, where is our financial concerns and what for
Justin, you probably said this, I apologize, but what's CPC's hard deadline on what they're going to recommend or based on? Because I would think that their hard deadline is the fact that they have to 45 days.
My awareness was that all project proposals needed to be seen last month. And because their chair or the secretary or whoever it was didn't post the time, which was not until last time, they're pushing it out a week. But it feels like a pretty hard deadline for project proposals, so they can really move forward and put forward their plan.
So they're asking the CPC for $150,000. And it would be wonderful for them to say, and we're going to get this money from this group, this money from that group, we have our own money. So that, I mean, technically, the CPC can move forward. Like, we're not holding them up, like, you're going to send a letter of support. And I think, potentially clarify and say, yes, we had a great discussion, all school members are in favor of the project, we'll allow you to know on that. The last thing they're thinking about is just sort of the funding for the rest of the project. Because I think we can say that, and I think it's completely honest. I think it's not out of the realm that we'll come through with the 20 or 25, but I don't hear anything here going higher than that, and I definitely get concerned. And I think a lot of that, you could relate it to that, is that we have to have more Saturday meetings, so there's so much to prepare. So I always think it's interesting when CPC wants to nail everything down, and the person wants to.
Okay,
It's not against them, it's just.
I want to pause the conversation here because I do want to address Mary's motion. So Mary, motion on the floor.
that motion is to reiterate our support of the project with the understanding that there will be future discussions, including that better of our budget for next year, there will be a further discussion to what the financial should we make that not more than? Okay, I'm just thinking so if they've got an expectation from us as to what
So I'll second it.
Okay, second. Now, further discussion.
Oh, sorry. I don't do that.
Yeah, that's all right.
That was okay, you
I'm trying to
answered
be a
it.
good example.
I really should be holy Bible.
Of course, the CPC could also, it could also go on the town warrant as, CPC is allocating this money subject to them getting the additional money too. I don't know if the town meeting can do that because does seem like they're out of sync with the budget, with everything else.
And this comes under the CPC. It's not that personal, it's just that they're sort of, they have their own input economic.
They have their own value.
It's all volunteers.
All right, so, any further discussion? So, the motion has been made to second all in favor.
And thank you for doing all these meetings.
Sure.
Thank you for showing up at town hall when it was dark.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm interested in the idea, so it's an opportunity to share the funding and All right, so sitting back down, leading the nation, Bob.
So, at the last school committee meeting, I was so excited to share this with you. The Department of Ed had emailed me, I shared that email with you. that they're so proud of Massachusetts' performance academically that they wanted to do a campaign, which coincidentally was perfect because we as a town wanted to do a campaign. And so we did tell them that we were interested in participating in their campaign. I did get further information for them as far as how it's going, the campaign is going to, the process. And it's a three-pronged process. And the first prong is to have a media campaign that includes a state website of the Department of Ed and local websites for the select communities that they asked to participate. And there's about 410 districts in Massachusetts. We are one of 50 that are participating in this. So that makes us a little bit more exclusive. I think people should appreciate the fact that the Department of Ed realizes that we're a pretty special town. And so at the last meeting, what they said was that they polled the community and they polled educators, and 65% of the community didn't know this data about Massachusetts. 50% of educators didn't know that did you know that Massachusetts public schools are leading the nation in the following measures? We're number one in the U.S. in reading and math on the nation's education report card, number one in the world in reading on the PISA International Assessment, and number one in advanced placement success in the country. So the first prong of this is for us to develop our local website, and I've only begun this process, but I'm very excited about it because there are a lot of people who are contributing. And the more I talk to our staff and I bump into people and say, oh, you have this wonderful program, are you going to participate in this? This is just a beginning of what it will look like, and we're going to pretty it up with pictures and make it really nice, but some of the data that our community may not realize that's wonderful about Maynard, so I put it opposite of the Massachusetts data, is did you know that Maynard Public Schools are leading Massachusetts in other important measures, including the following? In 2017, Maynard Public Schools were one of only 447 districts across the entire United States and Canada honored by the College Board with placement on the 8th Annual Advanced Placement District Honor Roll. In 2016, 97.8% of Maynard students completed a rigorous course of study as defined by the Department of Ed, in comparison to the state average of only 77.4%. And that's right on the Department of Ed's report card. In 2015, 76.7% of Maynard students attended institutes of higher education, which is higher than the state average. In 2014, Maynard High School received a letter from the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry commending the school for its international high school exchange programs. In 2013, Maynard High School received a letter and certificate from the Massachusetts Commission of Education, Mitchell Chester, that designated Maynard High School as a commended school for closing gaps in academic performance and making high progress. And some other little statistics. Maynard High School is one of only 5 other public schools in the state of Massachusetts that have an FCC licensed 500-watt tower. And we know the wonderful program that goes with that, WAVM. Maynard Public Schools are only one of 5 public schools and 1 charter school, immersion charter school. So out of 410 schools in the state of Massachusetts, Maynard is one of 6 schools that has an immersion program. So I know we were talking about it earlier, but having an immersion program is a pretty elite program for our district to be proud of. So these are just some of the bullet points, but what's really exciting, as I said earlier, was that as I start talking to the coordinator of the senior project, she's going to write about that. And I start talking to different organizations like the Maynard Education Foundation. They just sent me some information to talk about all these wonderful things on this website that are going on in Maynard. So I'm really excited about that. The second prong of this campaign is that there will be a State House celebration on April 5th that will highlight 3 public service announcement videos that the students have generated in the schools in Massachusetts. And our WAVM teacher, John Ogden, brought us into his class to explain the competition. So Charles and I went over there and talked to the kids. And he has a whole class of students who are going to try to get a winning video. So we would like to attend that. Whether we win or not, I want to bring those students to the State House because I think it's important that they're trying. So that's another piece of this that we're working on. And then the last piece is that they're going to hold a Leading the Nation Week from March 7th to 11th, where local Leading the Nation events will occur. So we'll be celebrating not only the Massachusetts, but our own Leading the Nation statistics and all the good information that we can provide. So we have several ideas for that. Some of them include, I've talked to the athletic director. There are certainly sporting events where we can, at halftime say, by the way, if you get a chance, go to this website. Let's just read off a couple of statistics for you or hand out some flyers about how wonderful Maynard schools are. We've also talked, one of our major initiatives is our senior project. This year, it comes a week after. So in the next agenda item, we're going to talk about possibly changing that on the calendar so that it will happen during this week. And we could celebrate, the senior project could be a celebration of Maynard's local success. And the Maynard Education Foundation was very kind. I wrote a grant so that we could provide a luncheon, a community business partnership luncheon for the people who we have a lot of business members in our town who come in for senior project and they listen to the students on their boards and they help with that. So we want to honor them and also invite more business in. And in fact, the Aspet Valley Chamber of Commerce, who has a great relationship with Colleen, said that they'd be happy to advertise that for us as well. So a lot of these things are really coming together. I'm really excited about them. And if there are some other events that other people have said that they might be able to generate too. We have a wonderful art department. They've talked about maybe doing some kind of art presentation. Our music department has talked about doing something too, maybe a fine arts night. So there are a lot of projects that we can do, and I think we could have quite a celebration that week. We may be very busy because there are so many wonderful things going on in Maynard, from music to sports to Spanish immersion. I mean, there are so many wonderful things that we can celebrate. So I'm very excited to report all of this is happening, and other people are getting excited and participating and helping us already put this together. The other thing is we've talked about our website, and so I'm really fortunate that we have a new technology director who feels like he can make this really special. So I can't wait for you to meet him at some point and to see the work that comes out of this. So I just wanted to report all these exciting things that are coming together, so that we really can get the positive news out there about how wonderful the Maynard Public Schools are. And that's all I have for that agenda item, but I could transition into the next agenda item.
Please do.
Okay, because I can talk forever.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
So,
Because they're linked.
right, the 2017-18 calendar, we're requesting a change, and of course, we never like to change a calendar mid-year. However, in the last agenda item, we spoke about the Leading the Nation campaign. And so I would recommend that the school committee approve a revision to the current 2017-18 school calendar by changing the current half-day schedule for May 18th to May 11th, because it's ideal for the senior project to be done during a half-day, because then the students who are staying back, the seniors, have the half a day to have these business community members come in. And so Colleen has prepared a draft of what that would look like, and I do feel it's a thank you. It's a minor change that I think the community would understand because this is so important. But I leave it up to you because calendar decisions are left up to the school committee. And so I would look for you to approve this calendar change tonight.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second? Okay, hearing a second. Discussion.
So I guess my question is if it's real, is it the high school that we're really thinking about here? Because should we change the high school and leave the other ones alone? Parents have made plans.
Stand up right and move. I know you
Oh, is
did.
this the whole district? Is this just
So
all sorry, I thought it was-
we could do that. We could just change the high school and do that. I think so the tour bus piece, where they're going to have like national media and stuff on the tour bus, I don't know how long it's going to stay in the district. Obviously, the teaching more credit if you do that.
I'm just thinking the high school tends, the kids are
Yeah.
oftentimes on their own anyway, so it's not
Yeah.
a very good deal. They can walk home versus the lower grades if their parents made no plans. I think it's, I don't know, I think it's kind of working so far, looking so far. I don't know, welcome to your feedback. But you feel on the other side.
We were adding a lot.
Carol?
No,
Yeah.
hold on just a second, because I do want to finish our discussion before I come to the audience. Are we literally done with the discussion now that I just should? Oh, damn. Hi.
So the only negative that I can see is that not every parent will find out about it, and they've already put it up in calendar.
Sure.
So that, that is, from my point of view as having kids in both Green Meadow and Fowler, it doesn't matter to me one way or another. Different Fridays, doesn't matter. But
Did you use your fancy school cancellation email? Set it up there?
That, you can do that, yes.
That goes for everything.
Younger kids rely on the
oh, good point. Yeah.
So do it across the
So do it across the district.
That's
something else. Yeah, it's a good thought. I hadn't thought about that. You're right.
It's 9:20, so we need like
Right.
some real group.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mary Brownlee's turning into a pumpkin over here, so. So that's the swing vote right there. Thank you, Shimon.
I mean, you cannot say there's no parent input. We win. You're leading the nation in parent input. Whatever we send after.
Happy birthday, Catherine Mitchell.
I just want to make a quick comment because you just said we're leading the nation in parent input. We didn't mention it before, but I wanted to mention, totally off the subject, but our...
Time out.
No,
Okay,
no,
time out.
wait, I have to say this.
No, time out.
Oh, I
There's a
didn't know you
motion
were,
on the
I didn't know
floor.
you were in a motion.
There's a
Sorry,
second.
go. I'll say it after. Go.
So we're in discussion on this item.
So to clarify my motion from the amendment is for the entire district. It's not just one school. I think
Okay, so motion to move from the 18th to the 11th, district-wide. So motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Michelle, you have
Can I just say, she just reminded me of it, I'm sorry, I spoke out of turn. But, kind of like Mary, she did it too. All the time.
And I redirected her just like equality, okay?
Maynard, the food service department put out a survey that I think you all probably got, and we received some additional prize items and stuff for our cafeteria because we had the most responses out of the entire state of Massachusetts from our parents. So I kept meaning to say that at one of these things and I forgot. For such a small town.
The lowest number of responses.
Either the highest percentage or,
5%.
I don't have it on me right now, but,
We are leaving.
but that's what I said, leading the nation in parent communication, you're not kidding?
All right, policy 513, school choice.
This is a first reading, Bob, you want to speak?
Yeah, the policy committee met, and this is a first reading. Basically, it was based on some legal advice that some of the practices that are listed in the policy really should be removed, and that we should add some of the mask recommended. So you'll see in red some of the stuff that really needs to be removed, and you'll see the additional, where it says add, the additional stuff in black, which are based on the MASC, Massachusetts Association of School Committee policy recommendations. So this is a first reading, and I know that Dawn had asked me to get some feedback at the policy subcommittee level from our attorney. I did get that feedback, by the way. So the three questions that we asked were, in the past, previous business managers were concerned that if we chose not to participate, that we wouldn't continue to get the tuition, and that is not true. The existing tuition from the students. So if you choose to not have school choice, once those students are in and they continue on through 12th grade, you continue to get the tuition regardless of whether you're choosing to participate or not. That was an important question that you wanted answered, Dawn. And Mary, one of the things we added on the second page was some language that I interpreted incorrectly. The attorney corrected me. And that is, once they are in, even though there's some language in there about funding for the program, the reality is, once they're in until 12th grade. So I interpreted it incorrectly.
Just the wording, I don't still have a second number box to come back.
Yes, correct.
Just change it from accepted to unlocked.
Colleen, did you get that? Say that again? Second number 5. So we have to correct number 6.
Just to change accept if to unless. So unless there's a lack of funding, instead of accepted.
Yeah.
Except if something.
Maybe it is.
It's not even real
Unless it's something
words.
you got.
It comes from NASC, so.
Okay, and then the third question was, I'm trying to remember what the third question was.
Was that,
Oh, yes, that in the past, we verbally, it wasn't part of our policy, but we verbally have said that faculty could have their students participate, but the attorney recommended that you don't, anybody can participate in school choice, so you really shouldn't have to say faculty will, because it almost feels like you're giving them a preference. And not that we have been giving them, they go into a lottery if you only have so many seats. And in the past, we had so many seats, it was never an issue. But we always wanted to be good, which was a nice thing. But the reality is, this year I think we had, 3 seats? 4 seats? It was very minimal. So his point was, when you approve it, just approve it subject to the policy. Don't add any extra language, like teachers get preference or something like that. That wouldn't be appropriate. So those were the 3 questions you had asked us to get. We got the information from the attorney. And more importantly, the attorney did say that we really need to get rid of all the red language, because that's old language that's really not appropriate now, so.
Okay.
So, hopefully this is a first reading. We'll bring it back to the next meeting for a second reading, because ultimately we do have to make the decision going into next year as to whether we're going to have school choice or not. But the good news is we'll still get the tuitions for the students who are currently in English State.
It's the way I've always understood it to be true. Once they're in, you
Yeah.
own them until.
Right.
So you don't just have a policy that we have school choice, but this year we don't happen to have any openings.
You could.
You can, why, yeah.
Because that's kind of what we did this year, was like, well, we only have 3 seats.
because then let's say 5 people move up.
Right, right.
Then I would say,
Yeah, so last year, Mary, for example, the motion was we are closing for school choice with the exception of these, like, X number of seats in these particular grades.
It was only a few.
It was,
Yeah, it would have to be.
Yeah.
exactly.
So that's why we check on wording, where it can shift to be fine.
So this is just a first reading. If anybody has any recommendations, further recommendations, feel free to contact Colleen, and hopefully we'll get a second reading done, and then we can choose, get our data from the principals and figure out what we're going to do on school choice next. FY19 budget update. So I'm not sure if I only have a little update, but I do want to thank the members of the finance committee who have been meeting in the tri-meetings, because I do think there's been a lot of positive. I know, Mary, you mentioned that, you feel that there's a lot of positive. I feel a lot of positive coming from that. And, this year, we haven't had a lot of talk about lesson level funding because, as a result of, I think, those meetings, the town accountant actually asked Michelle for the data that would be required for level funding. And that hasn't happened in the past. So my hope is that they're hearing you, and that, hopefully we're going to get at least level funding, but at least they're asking for that. And that's, to me, that was something good to report, because that didn't happen in the past 3 years. You were asked for something minimal.
And so of the information that you gave us to go into that meeting with, like the, 1% matters and, the cuts that there have been over the last 4 years, I guess, that kind of thing, really gave us some good information to lay out in front of them and to have serious conversations. So we hope that was a good thing too. So thank you for that.
One other thing, we just probably, just the other one first, but it's 200.
Another night out for everybody.
So that's all we have for tonight. We should be first week of February. So we have school committee on the 1st. We have school committee on the 1st, and the second Saturday is the 10th, so we have one more meeting.
So for anyone interested, the town gets together, three reports. We all get together, the founders and the public, that is the second Saturday in the library.
It's a long one.
I'm sorry, town library.
In the Roosevelt room.
Yep, and there are two snacks. So two snacks is your.
A lot of carbs.
Lot of donuts.
A lot of carbs. And free coffee.
I've been to a number of them over the years, and I've never seen them. And it's probably because we don't publicize. So we're trying.
Yes. No.
No, I'm just saying, so we're trying to make sure we tell people.
8, right?
8:30 maybe.
Okay.
8:30.
I think
somewhere.
8 is like breakfast and then 8:30 is.
Like I like little carbs.
People
they're
get
there
up in
early.
the middle
Carbs
to
are
get the
there early.
donut because.
But yeah, there's lots of PowerPoint, there's lots of explanations,
Yeah.
lots of pictures of things that you can review, compare, and students have to think. So it's a really good recap of the spreadsheet. Lots of data.
Yeah.
I recommend if you want a little prelude to that, to come to Maynard Finance Night
On the
to have a nice
31st.
idea on what the schools. Yeah, interactive, it's very,
Hey,
it's
Michelle?
gonna be so much fun.
Full
And there'll
disclosure.
be carbs there too. Promise.
Full disclosure, on the 31st, my family will be represented, but my wife wants to come, so I have kid duty that night.
Okay,
Amanda wants to get more involved in the process, so.
we'll take her. You have
Yeah,
to
what's up?
consider it.
What has gone out to the community in that regard? I know I've seen it like to the school community, but out into Maynard.
Well, so we have it on our Facebook, we've put it in the blogs, we've posted it on, the principals have put it in there and things. I haven't done anything other than that, I think.
But your larger
And then I
question
thi-
is, it's in our sphere right now predominantly because it's our event. But if you want to rebroadcast the information out through Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is into your circle, other people in the community that maybe don't have kids in the schools or what have you, I think it's all pertinent to the conversation. Yeah, we absolutely could.
And also, we sent it off to the PPM as well, but I don't know that it's there. So
I think we were planning on putting it in the newspaper, we just haven't. Yes, actually Colleen said that as well. She's been harassing me to do that. January 31st. Oh, great.
Yeah, the financing our future.
It's fun. Oh, good. Tell all your friends. It will be fun.
It's really cool. The visuals are amazing. It's like a game of life through.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
It's an interactive night. Like you're going to be talking. Like you're going to be talking. I mean, you could be quiet, but then it wouldn't be as fun.
That's why they're hard. You get like a trigger pie.
Yes, I'm going to give lots of cookies, some chocolate.
Okay, we invited the board of selectmen, the town administration, the
Yeah.
finance committee,
The treasurer's office.
Spread the word,
Yes.
Sarah, to your point, you know, so a lot of folks who might not be on our radar, but we know them personally, we just sort of, send it to this person, they'll send it to this club, and that, so it's interesting, it's almost in an informal way, but it's very nice, hopefully, so.
So we kind of launched in comments and questions, so let's just
Sorry.
carry on.
Again, I messed it
I
up.
only have one. So this Tuesday, 7 p.m., will be the inaugural meeting for the Student Nutrition Task Force in this room. Very informal, just talking folks who want to talk about the slate up for people choosing how to make it. And brainstorming. Catherine and I will run it, but everyone's welcome to it.
son is only working multiple months after school.
The only thing I would say about is having multiple conversations with people on different spaces, including just about really short. I think we get lost sometimes in budget discussions and talking about ways we can improve and formally just to celebrate and also focus on great learning, which is like the communication that has to be about, that meeting tonight, seniors talking about really cool things. We can talk about the programs that we're trying to figure out how best to make them happen for all the students that are involved in the program. But there's still, as teachers, still every day are doing really cool things that we hear about. So I just think finding ways to be able to highlight that, and I don't know if that's just do that, maybe even in school committee meeting or something. I don't know what the best thing is, but I just wanted to bring that even at the night on the finance night where there's something in my social media. Put in there for people to understand, like we are really using our finances that we're doing what we can. This is very cool things to do that don't cost us more money. It's just being strategic, thinking about all these things we've been doing. And teachers that are really committed to acknowledgement that that brings for students being able to and involved and engage, all those things. So, and really being able to celebrate the teachers that serve the students through all this other stuff that goes on. So, anyway, that's my
I just wanted to comment on the Leading the Nation, because I think that plays into our marketing piece too. I think that's a really, really good first step, and to have that even on the website and, cleaned up in that way, it's gonna, at the end of it, it's gonna really do a good job highlighting a lot of what we're doing right, principally, to what I'm gonna say. So it's a really good, multifaceted approach.
Being on the town website last night, economic and clerk's office website, family members of people who are for the election, so we can vote for it. 43 signatures to get your name on the ballot again. It's open to other people in this room as well, if you have any interest in sitting where we sit and getting your name on the ballot. Go see Michelle downtown and get your papers pulled. 43 signatures, get your name on the ballot. We do have 2 seats up for re-election. Terrence is official. Great one. 30.
Oh, it's a student.
Okay, cool. The two self-fill seats?
No.
They should be full for you.
Washington.
Because we're not filling the partial seat at this point. So, 2 years now. Any further?
I had one other thought with our new technology person. I was on our website again, just various things, and saw that I think if you forget which of the schools, I want to say it was middle school, it doesn't have the right people in the right places in that. And we talked about this this morning. I said that we don't have up-to-date information.
I think I heard you that the one that was more, the technology director loves the text reader, and that's like one of the first things to start with some of the websites, where it was updated, or what's not being updated. But I think that's pretty much.
It was just a couple of days ago, so I'm thinking we've got it was full-time person and part-time.
I think I had seen it too, and I think it may have been the principals or so many changes that we had in staffing.
People, it was like all the administration was wrong.
Oh, yeah. But that's good to point out.
It's just so important, yeah.
Oh, keeping kids back. Right. I did on Google. I realized that's what people, because I don't know. Yeah, do you have a better name, because it's really funny. Okay, let me know.
Crowdsource it, Nancy.
It's not about feeding the staff.
Yeah.
Take it to the coffee machine tomorrow, float it out there, come back to us with something.
Well, I was suggesting it's do that.
You fell asleep during that policy discussion, apparently.
Challenge of choice.
And, you know,
You just had a training today.
you're not the first person that's brought that up. All right, so, hearing no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion's been made, do I have a second? Motion's been made and seconded, all in favor? Can't get my hand up fast enough. Thank you, everybody.
Disappointment at 7.